Welcome to the Den, the Dark Entertainment Network. I'm the Gothic Rose, and this is the dark tale of the day. Let me take this moment to reintroduce myself. I am the Gothic Rose, hostess of the Dark Entertainment Network. This is a channel where the news meets conspiracy theories and makes babies in my brain, and it comes out my mouth. I do this because I enjoy it. If you like this type of content, please follow along, because I'm not going to stop. Here we are again, Fiends of the Den, and we are continuing the Haunted Hollywood History series, and we are diving into vaudeville, because vaudeville and cinema overlap and have a lot to do with each other. So let's take a deeper look. Vaudeville. It was a milieu of comedians and actors, dancers, singers, even animal acts from the 1880s until the early 1930s, and it flourished in the United States and Canada. And it was often referred to as the heart of American show business. It was the cornerstone. So, vaudeville really had brought us so many different types of acts. We have what I discussed yesterday with Mary Pickford, but there were so many more. I also discussed the act of Gypsy Rose Lee and her sister, Baby June, who had a huge vaudeville act back in the day. So, like I mentioned in the musical and movie Gypsy, Baby June, whose real name was Ellen Evangeline Havoc, was a child vaudeville performer under the guidance of her ambitious mother, Rose Thompson Havoc, and she was famously known as Baby June and later Dainty June as she grew older. So, her vaudeville acts often overshadowed her older sister, Louise, and Louise became known as the renowned burlesque performer Gypsy Rose Lee. And if you want to read more about her life, you can find the book American Rose. But let's get back to Baby June. So she was 2 or 3 years old when she started dancing on point, which is not good for a child's development, but she had this natural talent. So she was this tiny little dancer. She captivated audiences with her charm, and she earned significant fame in the vaudeville circuit. But the pressures of performing and her mother's dominance led to her eloping at the age of 13. So after vaudeville's decline, June transitioned to Broadway and Hollywood, and she became a successful actress, dancer, and playwright. And her life and career, as I said, were immortalized in the musical Gypsy, which portrays the struggles and triumphs of her family. So June and Gypsy together had quite the life, basically chasing their mother's dreams, but they became very successful from it. And vaudeville was a huge part of that. And if you want to know more about June Havoc, you can find her two memoirs, Early Havoc and More Havoc. But she and her sister, Gypsy Rose Lee, and their mother were pivotal in creating a world for themselves in entertainment, a place for themselves in entertainment, immortalizing themselves in the world of entertainment. And that is what they were there for. It's an incredible story. If you haven't seen Gypsy, definitely check it out. So, burlesque and circus and vaudeville and sideshows have always been an interest of mine. Now, years ago, I downloaded a book onto, I guess, my iPad. It was called Behind the Burly Cue, The Story of Burlesque in America. And this is an oral history of American burlesque by Leslie Zemeckis, who is the wife of movie producer Robert Zemeckis. And oddly, I had an Instagram conversation with her about this book many years ago. Her other book, Goddess of Love Incarnate, The Life of Striptease Lily St. Cyr, and Feuding Fan Dancers, Faith Bacon, Sally Rand, and the Golden Age of the Showgirl, a tale of rivalry and glamour. Now, what this brought us to was Sideshow. The Sideshow and this very controversial film called Freaks, which I have seen. And she and I got into talking about how this film brought to life what goes on in vaudeville and circus and freak shows and behind the scenes. So, this film is from 1932 and it's described as a pre-code horror drama directed by Todd Browning. So, this tells the story of a conniving trapeze artist who plots to marry and murder a sideshow performer for his inheritance, only to face the wrath of the quote freaks she scorns. Now, the film was controversial for its time due to its use of real sideshow performers and was banned in several countries. So the bans of this film included the United Kingdom, where it was banned for over 30 years from 1932 to 1953. It was also banned in Australia, which they're not, it's probably still banned there because they're not giving me any times. And in Canada, the film was labeled as brutal and grotesque and faced censorship. So these bans reflected the social discomfort and societal discomfort with the film's usage of real sideshow performers and its unsettling themes. Over time, however, Freaks has gained recognition as a cult classic. Now, like I said, I have seen this film, and what I think people find controversial about it is the fact that maybe they paid these people or should have paid these people more than they have. It was an inside look. If you've ever seen American Horror Story, The Circus, it was based on some of these characters in Freaks. A man who could light a cigarette, he had no arms and no legs. He could hold the cigarette in his mouth and light a match with his tongue and light the cigarette. A person with no arms that used their feet for hands and arms and things like that, their feet and legs. I mean, I'm not sure if people were offended because they used these people in the film or because it's something they didn't want to see. But if you do get a chance to see the film, I highly recommend it. But I also recommend watching and reading everything they ban just to see why. If you're looking, you can actually rent it on Amazon Prime for $3.79. But with this movie and those books by Leslie Zemeckis, back in the 90s, there was a Broadway musical, which I think also had a revival. And, of course, some controversy around it. So let's talk about Sideshow. Sideshow is a Broadway play that revolves around all of the quote unquote circus freaks. Now, it's a really interesting play because it actually is based on the lives of Daisy and Violet Hilton, who are the conjoined twins who became famous vaudeville performers in the 1930s. So the show explores themes of love, acceptance, and identity, and it features powerful songs as Who Will Love Me As I Am. Now, I saw this show in, let me think, it was in previews in 1997 when I was a new student at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, AMDA, in New York City. And I saw it before it came out on Broadway. Our whole school got free tickets for the preview. It was a beautiful, beautiful, brilliant show. And one of the performers, who was one of the dancers, he played the Snake Man, Barry Finkel. He actually ended up being one of my dance teachers at the school. So as we're sitting there watching this show, I remember someone sitting next to me. Now, this is just a weird side note, personal story I have to share with you that has to do with this time and has to do with Sideshow. I'm sitting next to a student. His name is Joel Snyder. And years later, a bunch of us were talking because it turned out Joel Snyder had been sentenced to 30 to 60 years in a murder in Union County. I think it was Missouri somewhere. The man murdered his yoga instructor. He was also a yoga instructor. But yeah, I sat next to him at this showing of Sideshow in 1997. And then I didn't know this at the time. He worked at FAO Schwartz, and I walked in around Christmas with some friends of mine, and he was working in the ball pit in the front of the store, like playing with kids and entertaining kids. And the next thing you know, and those were yoga balls. That's what we call yoga balls now. But in the 90s, they were just big balls in a ball pit. And this ball comes and smacks me square in the face. I had no idea where it came from. He must have seen me from outside the window come in and smacked me in the face with this ball and was like, hey. And I was like, well, that's really weird. And then he would follow me around a lot after that. And his roommate has stated, I will never not be scared of him. So I not only went to school with a murderer, sat next to a murderer at a preview of a Broadway show, but I also got hit in the face with a giant yoga ball by a would-be murderer. So let's get back to vaudeville. These sideshows were very popular. And two of the biggest sideshow and vaudeville stars were the conjoined twins, Daisy and Violet Hilton. They were born in 1908 in Brighton, England. They were joined at the hips and buttocks, but they shared no major organs. Their mother was an unmarried barmaid, and she gave the twins up to her employer named Mary Hilton. Mary immediately saw their uniqueness as an opportunity for profit. The twins, as babies, were exhibited as sideshow attractions, touring Europe and later the United States. In the 1920s and 1930s, Daisy and Violet Hilton became vaudeville stars, and they performed alongside notable entertainers like Bob Hope and Charlie Chaplin. Despite their fame, they of course faced exploitation and legal battles for independence, and on the advice of Harry Houdini, they were emancipated in the early 1930s. So the Hilton sisters appeared in the film Freaks in 1932, and another film called Chained for Life in 1951. And their later years were marked by financial struggles where they actually ended up working in a supermarket and said that they only had to pay one of them. And they would both do work and bag and check people out. And they passed away in 1969 in Charlotte, North Carolina. But the sad part is they passed away within days of each other, conjoined twins. Daisy and Violet Hilton passed away in January of 1969 in Charlotte, North Carolina, of the flu. At the time, they called this particular flu the Hong Kong flu. I understand that that has some negative connotations. Again, just to give you the full history of everything, I'm giving you the name. But the very tragic part is that Daisy died first, and Violet was still physically connected to her deceased sister, and she passed away, they're saying, sometime 2 to 4 days later. So we can dig a little bit deeper into the impact that vaudeville had and how so many of these stars who were at their peak, especially during the vaudeville times, died penniless and tragically. And with that, I thank you for joining me in the den.